Well, hello. We're here at Wethersfield Evangelical Free Church, and we're going to talk today about leader development among the staff of the church. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, say who you are and your area of ministry, and how long you've been there. We'll start with you, Mike.
My name's Michael Conserva. I'm the executive pastor. I've only been here a year, so I just had my 1-year anniversary at the beginning of the month, so that's all I've been here.
I'm Scott Solberg, and I've been here 14 years, and I'm the lead pastor, and my area of responsibility is mainly with vision casting and leader development and primary preaching.
And my name is Ryan Warner, and I am the youth pastor here, and I've been here just over 2 years. Just celebrated my 2-year anniversary last month. So.
Great. Let's dive in here. We're going to talk about how leader development takes place among the staff. So I just would love to hear about how you as a staff relate. What's the frequencies of your meetings? What happens at your meetings? So let me start with you, Mike.
We have a bi-weekly staff meeting. So all the staff come together. We have altogether about 8 or 9 people in that staff meeting. And we, one of the things that we do is we're going through a book right now called Crucial Conversations. So it's a book on how to better communicate with colleagues, and it's good for any interpersonal relationship that you have, whether it's a wife, a child, or a colleague, a coworker, or even an enemy. It helps you to understand crucial conversations, how important they are, and what you need to do in order to frame a conversation in a way that the other person can receive it and respond in an appropriate way without allowing our emotions to get out of control. And that's really crucial in a staff meeting, especially when we have pretty robust staff meetings. So we talk about pretty much everything in the church, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so sometimes the stakes are quite high.
Yeah.
So this is a great tool, but that's one of the ways that I try to intentionally develop the staff is by introducing resources like this, and then we go through it pretty methodically and watch videos, answer questions, and then we go into the normal. We do that for about 30 minutes, and then we go into the normal business of the staff agenda and just work through that.
Great.
Yeah.
What's the frequency like in terms of not just gathering all together, but how you guys connect and in the leader development process, like outside of those meetings?
Well, one of the things that we do is we have a process that we use called KRAs, so Key Result Areas. And so essentially helping the staff to identify what their big rocks are. So the big things that they want to accomplish in terms of whatever it is that they do. And as a result of writing out those KRAs, for instance, everybody in the staff has 4 or 5 KRAs. The first one, everybody has one KRA that's all the same, and it's personal development. And we take that as a very important aspect of leader development. We're not just concerned with what they do, but who they are and how to build into them as people, and having goals for themselves, objectives for themselves, whereby they're developing as individuals. And then we get together. So I meet with a couple of staff that I oversee. Ryan meets with his team. Scott meets with both of us. And everybody's meeting with somebody. So Colleen meets with the secretaries because she's the office manager. And so everybody's meeting with somebody once a month to go through their KRAs. And one of the things that we do is we go through a process called reflect. So we reflect with them on the past month, how that went, and then we have a time where we refocus. We first of all relate, and then reflect, and then refocus on the things they want to accomplish next month based on their KRAs. So that's a living document that they develop and have, and we work with them to help them develop that. And then there's a time where we just talk about resources and how can we better equip that person or find resources to help that person. So those are some of the things that we do in terms of the staff and leader development.
That's great.
I would say one of the benefits too is that they come up with their goals, so and then they get signed off on. But at least they're demonstrating some initiative of what they're wanting to accomplish, and then we come along and just help support that and encourage that and develop it. And then the other thing that kind of emerged this year with the staff was on Wednesdays. It's kind of sporadic, but it's fairly regular. On Wednesdays, whoever's available, we do lunch together. So that's a non-meeting. It's just, it came actually up from the staff saying, it's sometimes can be all business, and it's just good to just kind of grab a half hour, 45 minutes once a week, and so that ebbs and flows, depends on the schedules and who can make it. But I think that's been a good.
It's been good.
It's been a healthy thing to do. To just kind of stop, connect.
And it's amazing that the
Touch
conversation
base.
that comes up, and the opportunity just to speak into different situations. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Another thing that kind of triggered my mind as Scott was speaking. Our KRAs among the 3 pastoral staff are all the same. So we have personal development that we work on, and then we also have, based on our irreducible core of leader development, church health, and church multiplication. So our KRAs are built around those 3 things. But each of us is looking at it differently. So he's coming at it from a completely different perspective as a lead pastor, right? I'm looking at it from more of an oversight support perspective, and Ryan is, of course, looking to build a specific team for what he's doing with youth ministry. So that's something that Scott initiated with us, because we all had very different KRAs. We're kind of all over the place, and then we kind of looked at it and said, yeah, we should really, if this is what we're about, this is our irreducible core, we should really put our KRAs around that and try to build into that. So.
In fact, there's a word for each of us. Like I'm vision, Mike's implement, and the word for Ryan is replicate. So it's like he's fleshing it out in his context. But we're all, like Mike said, we're all coming at it from a different area of responsibility.
So it sounds like those areas were personal, leader development, church health, and church multiplication. So that's the same big rocks for all of you, with different goals for each of you in those areas.
Right.
Yeah, and there might be another one thrown in there specifically for us, but coming primarily those 3 areas, the irreducible core.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you guys, once you have your goals under those different big rock areas, kind of how you assess and have accountability around those goals.
I mean, I can talk about that some. One of the things that's been neat for me, having been here 2 years now, and as we mentioned, like I meet regularly once a month with Scott, and he kind of coaches me through my KRA. So, and as Mike relayed, you start with this process of just relating. Mm-hmm. So part of the process is checking in on how life is going, how my family's doing, how my relationship with Jesus is, like these kind of just taking the pulse of where I am as a person. And then we shift into reflecting on, okay, the past month since we last met, what were some of the goals and how did it go, getting those accomplished, and just reflecting on maybe what went well, what didn't go well, what got in the way, if something got in the way. It's just a time of processing how the month went as far in regards to our big rock goals, and then we go into focusing on the next month. So I'll come with my 3 or 4 or 5 goals for the coming month, and sometimes it's just taking what I didn't accomplish and bumping it to the next month. But more often and ideally, it's a process of looking ahead and thinking, okay, these are my big rocks. Here's what's coming up calendar-wise. How do these things come together to make specific goals? And Scott will kind of reflect with me on those and help me to see like if there's something I'm not thinking of, or just affirming, yeah, do that, that'd be great. But it's been a really encouraging process for me, mostly because I feel like, in this conversation about leader development, and I've found that I don't, in like leader development, sometimes it can be task oriented. It can be about making sure that this leader gets the things done. And I've experienced this differently. I've experienced this to be about Ryan development. And as I am being developed as a leader, I will therefore be more effective in accomplishing the roles. But I feel like I have grown immensely in the 2 years I've been here, kind of experiencing this process. That's been really neat.
So what has Ryan development looked like?
Well, one of the things that's been what was a process was something called the Vista, and this was kind of a pastoral development process that Scott led me through. And there's a kind of a questionnaire, lots of good questions for anyone in a pastoral role to think about. Some questions I had not thought about before or had not thought about well. And so it was a pretty in-depth, it definitely digs in, not just professionally, but personally, kind of who I am as a person and as a pastor. And there was just a time of I was given it and a time to dig in and give here's what I think are my answers to these questions. It's like 10 pages long or so. It's pretty in depth, and then I gave my answers to Scott, and he reflected on them, and then we met together, and he kind of gave me his thoughts on what he saw in me and how he saw my responses. And what comes out of that is kind of an action plan, or if you will, it's I don't remember what the exact wording is. Personal development plan. That's the thing. And so it's this opportunity, like for Scott to speak into me and say, and it's not. And what I appreciated was it felt detached from like my job as the youth pastor at WEFC. It wasn't about that. It was about Ryan's development as a pastor. And so kind of where are the areas for me to look at growing, be intentional, be focused on growing in the coming months and years. And I appreciated how Scott valued me enough to take the time to do that, when some of those things that we're talking about, like one of them for personally was about my career, thinking about where long term I'm thinking of going and being. Well, that doesn't help WEFC, but it develops me, and I just appreciated that kind of feeling valued in that way.
That's great. Well, let's shift a little bit here and start talking about how not only you are being developed as a staff, but how in turn you're developing other leaders in the church. Scott, do you want to share a little bit about kind of how you go about developing other leaders in the church?
Yeah, well, we've used the model of 3, 12, 70. Through the Vista process, I encouraged Ryan, was one of the personal development areas, to kind of think about how are you doing, not just doing youth ministry, student ministry, but how are you intentionally developing leaders? So can you identify who you would call your 3, your 12, your 70? And so that's a way I've tried to approach leader development beyond just our staff ministry team. So I've identified my 3, my 12, my 70. My 3 would include Ryan. We have, and Mike and I are kind of like, I view Mike and I as kind of like strategic partners, so we're kind of building into each other. It's kind of a different kind of unique kind of a role. But then we have a group of guys that we are training to preach, so that's part of my 3. My 12 would be my board and my small community group that I'm involved in, and then my 70 would be the community group leaders. So I look at each of those and I ask 3 questions. How can I serve each of them? What can I do to help develop them? And Ryan picked up on just that shift that I've made recently over leadership development to leader development, and it's really about developing the person. So how can I serve that person? So with each one, I kind of identify, okay, here's what I want to do. And then I'm inviting leaders into sacrifice, so what sacrifice do I want to invite them into? So like the preaching cohort, it's, here's what I'm asking you to do to prepare to come. And eventually, we have one guy in there who's never preached. Eventually he's going to have to go through the process of putting us. So I just, as they demonstrate that they're faithful to the sacrifice, then you can take them another step. And then we rejoice over the blessings that emerge. So Ryan's case, what he just shared, is a case in point. Like there was life spoken into him through this process, and just to be able to sometimes identify that is helpful. So. So so just identifying, making sure you know who those people are, and very simply, what's a process I want to go through with them to help them grow as people,
Great.
leaders.
Yeah. So, for example, he mentioned that one of the development goals for me was identifying my 3, my 12, and my 70. So that was something that I did not have kind of a clear picture for a year ago. But going through kind of this process, I've kind of been able to narrow down in my context that my 3 is a handful of students that I am pouring into specifically for developing them as leaders. And we're meeting regularly as a small group and kind of developing, talking about leadership and what it looks like to develop specific goals and skills in that context. So a lot of replicating what's being done in me. That was my word, replicate. So a lot of what I'm doing is replicating what I'm experiencing with Scott and with the staff. And then my 12 is my volunteer leader team, the adults who are volunteer leaders in the youth ministry, and pouring into them and thinking about how do I develop them so that they can then pour into the youth well. And then my 70 is the youth, the entire youth ministry. And so as I think about, what am I teaching? What are we doing as a ministry? That's kind of how I'm approaching the 70. And so it's clarity. I mean, all of those roles existed, but clarity around their purpose and the vision and next steps with them has been really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Well, last area of focus for us in this conversation, guys. I'd love to hear some more about your future vision for your church being a place not only where leaders who are currently here are being developed, but even being able to bring in other leaders. I mean, we're sitting here in a house right now that I think you want to see used for that purpose. So I just would love to hear a little more of the vision for the future.
Should we give them a tour of the house?
We can do try probably. Might be a little shaky.
Yeah. Well, this summer we had 3 interns with us, and it was a really positive experience. We had our children's ministry had interns for a long time, and a lot of times the focus was what they can do for us, and so we approached these 3 interns, and they were all 3 from within our church, which was really gratifying for us to see. All 3 contemplating ministry, but the 3 of us decided, we'd give them 15 to 20 hours a week, and I would say a good half of it was us pouring into them. So there was a weekly cohort where we gathered together, walked through spiritual disciplines, did a mini life flow presentation with them.
We did KRAs with them as well.
Yeah, we did
Helped them
KRAs.
develop some KRAs.
Yeah.
Even looking back when they go back to school, what some of their KRAs might be going forward. They thought that was helpful.
And we each coached one. Yeah, so we each had one that we coached. And so Ryan worked with a young guy just graduated from high school and taught him how to teach. And that was pretty neat. And Mike worked with the other one who was working with Colleen in worship, but Mike came alongside and built into him. And then I worked with a young man and taught him how to preach, and in addition to pouring into them. So that was a really affirming process for us. And so now we want to start a residency program, and we want to see God raise up primarily church planters, but we're recognizing that it could go in a whole bunch of different directions, but we want to kind of replicate that model and be able to have someone live with us for a period of time. And we have a house that we can offer, and we envision them being bivocational, and we would build into them over a period of time, and then hopefully see God raise them up to go and to move into church planting. And I'm always amazed at God's timing, as we begin processing this, and for God to bring a guy like Mike along who has a lot of experience doing this overseas. Just a convergence of I think affirming this direction for us. So we're looking forward to getting started.
That's exciting. It's exciting to see what God's doing, and I can't wait until it starts to snowball a bit.
Yeah.
'Cause I know it will.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when. And
Well, great. Well, I really appreciate you guys and your investment time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.